Breaking news today. Despite American denials of involvement in the Russian uprising, Biden is tightening the screws on Putin. A problem that has stumped the last 5 U.S. presidents, how to deal with Vladimir Putin, has been handed to Vice President Joe Biden by the brief uprising in Russia. Every American president since Bill Clinton has tried to reach out to the ex-KGB agent whose humiliation at the fall of the Soviet Union inspired him to make it his mission to restore Russian greatness. The majority of people have hoped for a fresh start in U.S.-Russia relations. But nothing was able to prevent relations between the two nuclear superpowers from deteriorating further. Even after then-President Bush met with Vladimir Putin and claimed to get a sense of the man's soul, Putin invaded Georgia while Bush was in office. At first, President Obama saw the Russian leader as a potential ally in his effort to eliminate nuclear weapons. Putin ignored this in 2014 when he annexed Crimea, and Donald Trump became overly deferential to an authoritarian and U.S. adversary whose behavior he often seemed to admire rather than condemn. Senator Biden had fewer illusions about Putin than most because he came of age in Washington during the most bitter years of the U.S.-Soviet standoff in the 1970s and 1980s. Even so, he made an effort to warm things up by scheduling a summit with his counterpart in Geneva. In response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, he re-energized NATO and arranged for an extraordinary supply of weapons and ammunition to be sent to the alliance. It is likely that mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin's revolt over the weekend was aided by the tense battlefield conditions brought about by the Western support that has allowed Ukraine to fight back against invading forces. On Monday, Putin was filmed boasting that he could have easily put down the uprising if Wagner Group leader hadn't decided to call off his march on Moscow in exchange for an apparent exile to Belarus. But the international community as a whole agreed that this showdown was the greatest threat to Putin's rule in his entire generation, and perhaps even a watershed moment that would eventually lead to his downfall. Therefore, Biden faces a possibility that none of his predecessors who grappled with Putin had to consider: that he is dealing with the endgame of this modern czar and the prospect of instability rocking a nuclear superpower that could have global implications. Not raising tensions. The United States and its allies made it clear that the showdown between Putin and Prigozhin, which was eventually called off, was an internal Russian affair during the chaos that engulfed Russia this weekend. Biden went to great lengths to dispel the idea, discussing how he had consulted with Western leaders on the right approach, after Moscow opened a propaganda front on Monday by claiming it was probing whether Western intelligence was involved in the coup attempt. They concurred with me that we must leave Putin with no room for argument. I cannot stress this enough. We gave Putin no reason to blame the West or NATO for this. We were very clear that we had no part in this. We had nothing to do with it, the president told reporters. On Monday, CNN reported that the United States had warned select senior officials and allies, including the British, about Prigozhin's plans in advance. The disclosure appeared to be the most recent evidence that the United States is receiving high-quality, accurate intelligence from within Russia. This probably irritates Putin greatly and could make him even more isolated. Meanwhile, Biden's remarks mirrored the strange contradictions in his approach to Putin. Biden has done everything in his power to prevent a direct clash between NATO and Russian forces, which could risk an escalation into a world war, while sending billions of dollars worth of arms and ammunition to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to fight for the survival of his country. However, the red lines keep growing. When Putin ordered his troops across the border last February, the influx of ammunition, heavy artillery, Patriot anti-missile missiles, and tanks was unimaginable. However, Biden's claim that the United States had nothing to do with the weekend uprising is almost certainly accurate. A warlord like Prigozhin, whose hired guns are accused of a catalogue of atrocities in Ukraine and Syria, and a Russian leader who is subject to an arrest warrant for war crimes are not issues that the United States should get involved in. Moscow's accusations of Western involvement in the uprising appear to be a distraction from the divisions that threaten to weaken Putin's rule. They look like they're trying to get the Russian people to band together against an imaginary foe. Putin has cast the conflict in Ukraine as a fight against the West's attempt to strip Russia of its rightful place as a global power. This detracts from the fact that he illegally sent troops into Ukraine, igniting a conflict that has shown the supposedly powerful Russian army to be poorly led and equipped, a hollow version of the Red Army that upheld the Soviet Empire. The West's changing reaction. While the United States and its allies avoided appearing triumphant during Prigozhin's rebellion, they are now trying to use it politically to increase the amount of pressure exerted on Putin within Russia. Secretary of State Antony Blinken argued on American Sunday talk shows that the uprising, in which the United States did not participate, demonstrated weaknesses in Putin's authority. This became a popular theme in Europe on Monday. According to British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, Prigozhin's rebellion is an unprecedented challenge to President Putin's authority, and cracks are emerging in the Russian support for the war. Josep Borrell, the EU's High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy, took a similar stance after several days of talks among Western alliance leaders. Events, he said, prove Russia's military might is cracking, and the instability is affecting Russia's political system. Some knowledgeable Americans have cautioned against dismissing Putin just yet. I interpreted this as Prigozhin's desperation to keep the Wagner Group going. Former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton said on CNN on Monday, "I don't see it as a populist threat to Putin, and I don't see it as cracking the aura of Putin's invincibility." However, Bolton did concede that Putin's military position is, undeniably, weakened. Putin has shown no indication that he will pull back and bring the troops home in the face of pressure from Moscow's enemies. In fact, he may be in such a precarious position that he cannot afford to risk public disgrace by taking such action without first securing gains he can use to claim victory. This explains why thousands of Russian troops have been sent into a conflict that has shattered Russian prestige and worsened its strategic position in Europe. Prigozhin called the battle in Bakhmut a meat grinder. However, with the war in Ukraine going poorly, Putin is now facing a new political front at home, thanks to Prigozhin's piercing of his personality cult of an all-powerful autocrat impervious to challenge. Unless Putin is able to restore his authority, Biden may become the first American president of the 21st century to successfully outmaneuver the Kremlin strongman.